Excuse me,
Yeah.
is it possible to ask you a couple of questions either on or off camera?
Off camera, sure.
Is it okay if I point the camera down
Sure.
so nobody sees your face?
Sure.
Okay. Now, I go to both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian demonstrations in order to get different people's points of view. And one question that I get a lot from pro-Israel supporters is, if it isn't about anti-Semitism, why does everybody turn up for pro-Palestinian demonstrations? Why aren't people demonstrating about other equally or even worse humanitarian situations in the world, like Burma or Sudan or the Uyghurs in China? And one thing I did this morning was I paid a quick visit to the Sudanese embassy, and there was not one person demonstrating outside.
It's a fair point. I agree,
Yeah.
it's a fair point.
Let me answer this question,
Sure.
actually.
Yeah?
Because this has been going on, it's the same problem that's been going on for more than 100 years now, caused by the West and Western interest in the Middle East. So the reason there are demonstrations here is because if it wasn't for British interference and American interference in Middle Eastern politics, this problem wouldn't have been propagated throughout these 100 years. Israel wouldn't have been emboldened to completely destroy the rights of the Palestinian people. So they are slightly different issues here. Yes, there are a lot of humanitarian crises that are happening around the world, but in no other crisis does Britain and America play this much of a role, fund this much of the war, and have this much stakes in what is going on. That is the difference. It's not about anti-Semitism at all, because you see Jewish people here calling for this to end. And we have nothing as pro-Palestinian supporters against Jewish people. They're beautiful people.
I live with a Jewish guy right now. He's my landlord,
I have
Jewish,
many
and he's
Jewish
a friend.
friends
He's my
who are
a great
also
friend for 15
pro-Palestinian.
years. Nothing about Judaism. Nothing at all.
This has nothing to do with being Jewish. There is a very clear and distinct difference between Judaism and Zionism. And what we're against is Zionism and colonialism.
Very different things.
And the fact that there are Western interests in this, it means there is colonialism that is being propagated, which is the main difference between this crisis and everything else that you see around in the world.
So what do you think? Do you think the difference between Judaism and Zionism, they are very different things, right? It's nationalism, basically.
Personally, I'm very critical of a lot of what Israel does. I'm certainly strongly opposed what Israel has done to Gaza since October the 7th. I do believe in Israel existing as a place where Jews know they have somewhere safe to go to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I don't want to take my chances that another Nazi regime may rise to power, and everybody will say, "Oh, it's a shame they're murdering Jews in England," but they won't take you in anywhere.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Do you not think that a Nazi regime is rising to power against Arabs and Muslims right now? They are. And the fact is that actually, as people, what we should be trying to do is to fight racism in all of its forms against all people where we are. We shouldn't have to leave the countries that we're from to go flee to another safe haven just because we're feeling threatened in those countries. Rather, the right thing to do is to fight racism right here, to say no to anti-Semitism right here. If a Nazi regime was to come to power or to rise now against the Jewish people or the Arab people or the Muslims or anybody, we shouldn't be fleeing those countries. We should be fighting them right here. You shouldn't have
I
to
hear
flee
what
your
you're saying.
homes.
And during the early part of the century, there was certainly a conflict within political Jewish circles between those who thought, well, if we all support socialism or communism, then anti-Semitism will go away, and those who felt, no, we need a place where we can defend ourselves. That is an argument that's been going on in secular Jewish circles for a long time.
Exactly. Okay. And also, let me tell you one thing. Why should you have a safe place to be on the expense of the Palestinian people not having a safe place to be? The Palestinian people in 1948, 750,000 of them were forcibly expelled out of their homes, their villages destroyed, and since then, their entire culture has been almost erased. And now, people like Trump want to displace another 2 million people out of Gaza completely. But the Palestinian people need to feel safe in their home too.
Do you know about the UN Partition Plan of 1947, which proposed splitting what today would be Israel plus the occupied territories into an Israel and a Palestine, and having Jerusalem as an international city?
Okay. But did you know that that deal was going to give Israel a lot more land than the Palestinians? It wasn't a fair split.
Most of that land was the Negev desert.
And also, do you know the history before 1947? Because everybody thinks that this problem started in 1947, when actually it started well before. And Palestine was majority Arab, and since the early 1900s, there has been a specific Zionist project to have Jewish people move to that land so that the majority can become Jewish, so that finally they can say, we are a Jewish majority here, now it's our right to have this land. And this was with the help of the British people that fought against the Palestinians.
That's true, but
so
the Jews...
Let's not pretend that anything started on October 7th, or even on 1947. We need to go way back into history to really understand.
But that's true, but for the Jews who settled there, who were settling there, they didn't see that as a colonial project. They saw that as a liberation project.
As a Zionism project, though, there was still a Zionist ideology behind it.
Most of them, the majority of people,
let me tell you something. They didn't move there so that they can live happily with the Palestinians. The agenda was always, we're going to move there so that we're a majority, so that we can take over the land, so that we can call this land a Jewish land and an Israeli land. If you want a safe haven, why couldn't you just come together with the people who were already there and establish a land that makes everybody happy? Why did you have to go in and take over?
Certainly the Balfour Declaration makes it clear that a Jewish homeland was not to be at the expense of the population there.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Have you ever read the Balfour
Yes, I have
Declaration?
read it.
It doesn't actually specifically talk about the Palestinians or the Palestinian
It doesn't talk about Palestinian.
The
It talks about, it probably uses a word like indigenous population. Palestinian, there wasn't Palestinian identity in those days.
That was my point. That is exactly the heart of the issue. There was a very strong Palestinian identity. There was a very strong Palestinian community. They have always fought for this identity and for this community, and that is exactly what's wrong with history. And that is exactly what's wrong actually with the Balfour Declaration, is that they try to make it seem like Palestine was just an empty desert. The people didn't take care of their land. The people didn't really have a culture and didn't deserve to be in that land. So we're gonna come and take over this land and do better with it. And that is the true history. That is at the crux of everything. That is the thing. Do you know the book 100 Years War in Palestine by Rashid Khalidi?
I don't.
You should read it. It's a very, very nice, very objective account of the history that has been going on since well before the Balfour Declaration even,
okay.
And how the Balfour Declaration happened and what has happened since.
Okay, prior to the British mandate, Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire.
Uh-huh.
Now, from what I've looked at, and it's not a subject I've researched extensively, Palestine was like saying in Britain, I come from Devon or Cornwall. It wasn't like a national identity.
I think you're wrong on that. I think you're really wrong on that. There was a strong national identity. And at the time when the British came and they gave Syria and they gave Iraq, the Palestinians wanted their land and they wanted Palestine, but the British had different plans for Palestine. Trust me, if you really want to understand the history from before the Balfour Declaration up to the Balfour Declaration and beyond, this book that I'm telling you about is a brilliant one.
Okay. But anyway, thanks very much, both, for your time.
Thank you for having me.